Greetings, fellow humans. Welcome to Doing the Thing podcast. On today's episode, we have Asa. Asa and I worked together at Deer Hill. He was an intern and then got roped into, willingly, of course, coming out and doing a handful of canyons with me in the Utah desert, and now has wiggled his way up to the Northeast because the desert was too dry for him. So now he's in Seattle working in renewable energy. Welcome, Asa.
Thanks, Scott. Glad to be here.
So, Asa, what got you into the outdoor world?
My first experience in outdoor education was a Where There Be Dragons program that I was a participant on right after graduating high school when I was 18. I lived in Nepal for 3 months doing various things from treks to long homestays, spending a week at a permaculture farm and a week at a Buddhist monastery. Introduced me to outdoor ed that focuses on expedition style education as well as cultural immersion and communication. In the 7 years since, I've continued to be passionate about it. My real first introduction to the outdoors, I think my oldest memories are just Nordic skiing in the snow growing up in Massachusetts and dog sledding, which I've been doing my whole life.
Do you have a particular moment of how you got into outdoor ed, of getting to that point in Nepal? Or why did you want to sign up for Where There Be Dragons?
Yeah, so I reached a point where I had this section of my life available to do basically anything I wanted with. Through my mom, who's also an educator, she had met a couple people from Where There Be Dragons. And once I heard about that, I was like, that's really interesting. Started looking into the programs, applied for a couple of Where There Be Dragons programs, and also was lucky enough to get partially financial aid through their program because they're a program that does that for some of them. In the trip itself, I don't know if there's a specific moment, but the ability of my 3 leaders to continuously make this space for the 12 of us in another country that we were all unfamiliar with, us 12 participants became a really close group that 7 years later, we still keep in contact. It was that removing individuals from their personal communities and giving them the ability to make a new community in a new place while they're doing a ton of things on top of that. That's the first thing that made me passionate about outdoor education's ability to make those spaces in any physical space. I've continued to try to make those spaces elsewhere through my personal work and other things I do in my life.
You go to this Nepal thing and are impressed with how well they're able to create this space and make this brand new community. At what point were you like, I want to do that for other people?
When I started doing that for other people was through a college orientation program that does the same thing. Hamilton College, we have mandatory orientation trips. And I went on a trip when I was orienting up into the Adirondacks. And it was trying similar goals as with the Nepal program of using the outdoors as a tool for quickly making a community out of people who don't yet know each other. I was in an environment where that was partially the logical place for me to go and partially a community that I was already building with on campus. I went from being a participant in that orientation program to then starting to lead those orientation programs and getting involved with the Outdoor Leadership Center leading trips during the year. During the year trips, you end up having students who already know each other, and the goal is to break down some of those pre-existing expectations when you go out into the woods. And then with the orientation program, you have people who don't know each other at all yet. And it's sort of outdoor education can then be a tool to spark that forming of community. So it was nice that's the road that I then went down and get to use the same tool, both sides of the same tool, like the flat end and the pry bar of the same hammer.
That's awesome. So now you're working in renewable energy. What was the thing that shifted you away from outdoor ed, or how did you know to move on? What's that piece of the story?
I'm super passionate about the outdoor education industry for a lot of overlapping things that make me passionate about renewable energy, just like a care for the environment, people's relationship to the environment, and our ability to take care of the environment. I reached a point where for my personal needs and also like where I want to be able to apply the skills that I've learned both in and outside of outdoor education. I went from making the roads in outdoor education, but I need to also take care of other bits of my life. Working in renewable energy was a way that I could still hold on to both of those values and head in that direction for now, while still holding on to the connections I have from outdoor education and still trying to stay involved in the community, like with some smaller nonprofits like Big City Mountaineers near me in Seattle. Helps bring both funding and also the structure for kids from the city to have those experiences in the mountains, and broaden your experience to then broaden your expectations of what can I myself do in the world and what does it mean to be an individual in the world. That's a bit of a rambling answer to your how did you end up in renewable energy. I've been passionate about it in the same way I've been passionate about outdoor education. In my mind, they're so closely related in the things I care about that in pursuing one, I'm not necessarily not pursuing the other.
I see. What have you noticed about yourself as you've gone through this process of outdoor ed's impact on you?
Resilience, I think, in one word. When I made the decision to move out to Washington, I didn't really have much of a plan, but through my experience leading trips and participating in trips in the outdoors, I know what I need from a day-to-day basis. And that's basically like somewhere warm and dry to sleep, connection to people around me, and food and water. There's all the ideas of how one should move across the country, but I was like, you know what? I need that. I'm just going to pack up my stuff and start heading in the direction that I want to go in. I didn't yet have a job in renewable energy. I knew the general companies I wanted to work in, and I used it as an excuse to live minimally for a while, continue to value the connections I've made through outdoor education and other aspects of my education. While I was moving across the country to the place that I wanted to be, still get to go back, see the people who I hadn't seen in a while, work a bit more at Deer Hill where I met Scott, work another program there. The canyoneering trip that Scott mentioned, got to go and run away to the canyons for a couple of days. As I said, for me, renewable energy and outdoor ed have been connected in my goals. I was able to use the skills I had to facilitate that transition from one stage of my life to another.
Do you think that you would have been able to make that trek if you didn't do outdoor ed?
It would have been a lot harder. And I definitely wouldn't have done it the same way I did it. Not only in like, I wouldn't have literally gone and done a contract again in the outdoor ed industry, but the typical blueprint of packing up a U-Haul, road tripping with one other person, going back and forth and like cranking out that drive in 4 or 5 days, as I know a lot of people who have done that, probably would have looked a little more like that and a little less like living on the road for 2.5 months, being like, yeah, I don't know where I'm sleeping tonight, but I've got food, water, and shelter. I know the sorts of places that I can camp. If I need certain facilities, I know where to find those things. And those are the sort of skills that you develop both participating in and especially working in outdoor ed. I still would have ended up making some sort of move, but how the move looked would have been entirely different.
Do you think that you would have had a place lined up before you got out there?
Probably. Yeah. The comfort with the unknown is another thing that you have to get used to in this industry.
Do you have like a specific trip that comes to mind when you of like working through that, the fear of the unknown and being able to manage the unknown?
The one trip that I think I've talked to you about before, I had a somewhat traumatic incident with a canoe on a river. It was briefly a dangerous situation, and it entirely derailed our program's itinerary. It was one of many trips that were out, and we were the only one that started a day early. And by the time this incident happened, every other trip was just beginning. It could have taken us 3 hours to get to what would have been our takeout. But we reached a point where I was like, yes, this thing happened. But there were nothing. So then we had to fully reimagine what that trip meant. It went from being a canoe trip that was very physically taxing up to a portage, switch to sea kayaks and sea kayak. And it was one of the, as this program labels things, we have mild, moderate, and spicy trips. And this was the spiciest of the trips. It went from day one, we're in the rain, cranking up this river. The first morning, everyone else is still just getting loaded onto buses, and we're out here in the rain paddling. We have our lunch break, and bam, we have an incident with a canoe on the river, leads to us needing to turn around, but everyone's okay. Now what do we do with the next 4 days? Not to mention that we didn't have any toilet paper this whole time, because that was the one thing that we forgot to pack. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna teach y'all how to poop in the woods without toilet paper. Often there are trips where people refuse to do that. Here we have the gung-ho, charging up the river, portage, sea kayak across this long lake. We had one hard day. Then we had 4 days where we could just hang out. They had that bonding moment, and then they had the time in the outdoors with the removal from like phones, connecting them to the outside world, or not interacting. The only other people that they were interacting with was also other people on the river who were experiencing sort of the same things. And they really quickly were able to bond and create that community that was the goal of the trip in the first place. I guess I'll go into the other story of that same trip that I was thinking of before we were going to have this chat. This one student who was on the trip, who was like in a group setting, one of the quietest members of the group. But then by the end of the trip, when my co-leader and I would go back to our tent at night, and all of the students would cram into the same tent until they were like, we can hear you and it's time to go to bed. That one student is an incredible storyteller and would be telling stories for an hour at night. Everyone was getting into it. From the beginning of the trip, this was a kid who had a very different background from the rest of the people on the trip. That's the beauty of outdoor education to me, and the ability to bring people together. And sometimes you have those moments of hardship. Sometimes you don't know what's gonna happen, but you're going to get through it no matter what.
How long did it take for that kid to open up?
In this instance, it was a 5-day trip, and I think he was solidly opening up on the 3rd or 4th day. We start off, it's a program, it starts off on campus. None of these kids have ever met each other. Super awkward. What am I supposed to be doing right now? I'm around a bunch of new people. I have to show who I am, but who am I? I'm 18. I don't know. There were other groups that quickly formed within our orientation group about the 3rd day until we were out on trip. And I think that was probably partially expedited from the fact that we went from needing to seriously be cranking out the miles to we could hang out at camp for 12 hours and then load up, go 30 minutes downriver and set up another camp.
You went from having the high physical challenge, we got to crank out the miles, to like, okay, well, we've done that. We did this thing.
That for a day. Let's hang out.
Now we can just scale it back.
Yeah.
That's super cool. I think it's especially hilarious and awesome at the same time that this kid turns out to be the best storyteller, like probably that you've ever seen on a trip, right?
Oh yeah, he ended up in an improv group with some of my friends. He was super talented, and we had no idea about any of this until a couple nights into the trip. He starts telling stories, and it's like the glue that you didn't even know existed. I can't put it another way. It's one of those beautiful moments that you don't know is going to happen until it does happen.
Out of curiosity, what were the stories? Were they fiction, nonfiction?
I don't even remember. I mean, my co-leader and I were so exhausted by this point. That really long storytelling night was the last night we were out. The other nights we were just the two of us would fall asleep and just expect them to end up going to bed on their own. But yeah, some of them would be, I think some of them were just stories from where he grew up. Mostly personal stories. I can't remember if they were fictional stories or not. But if you have the ability to add that flair to a personal story, then That makes sense that you can also, that flair can go into improv or whatever storytelling styles you want.
Yeah, the images playing out in my head are like you're passing out, and as you are falling asleep, you catch these moments that you're like, oh my gosh, how are you making this up? Where is this coming from? This is so wild. I had a student when I was substituting where he was talking about how there's a safe and somebody was trying to break into the safe and how he made his way around the building or something. And I was like, I don't know. And he kept searching up, tourniquets. That was the thing that he kept searching up on his computer. And I'm like, and then it would be so funny because, like, as a woofer, I know all this stuff. So I would consistently quiz him. He was the safety manager of this energy company, and they had drilling sites or something like that. I'm sure there is a lot of truth to what you are saying, but like what the words coming out of your mouth raw are just so. No, I don't believe that for a second.
When you're out in the wilderness, there's no fact checking. I had a student who, every time we had an argument about something, he had a little notebook and he would always write it down. On every trip I've had since, it's just conversations, and then afterwards, everyone forgets about it. But he wrote them all down, and we got back to cell service, or like back to where he had Wi-Fi and could look it up on his computer. And he looked up every single thing in the list and came back to the group, and he was like, here's all the things that we didn't know, and now we know them.
What was the percentage of things that were true versus the things that weren't? Do you know what that breakdown was?
Oh, again, this was years ago, so it's hard to remember. He also ended up being a really talented improv artist. Just randomly, totally different. But yeah, I don't remember the exact things, but it would be things like, it could be anything from, oh, what's the capital of this country, to who did this thing in history. We're trying to figure it out, but we don't remember. We remember what the thing is, but not everything. And then he would write it down. He looked it up at the end. Oh, now we know.
But here we go. That reminds me, I went on a mission trip and I made a quote book. I wrote down the absurd quotes and then like the caption, like had the story that was behind it. Oh my gosh, I should do that on a trip. Anyway.
Quote book, another great go-to. Or just having group journals. I've been on trips where they do that as well. And then it's like, you'll read back through the journal. It's like, oh, this is something someone else did that even though we were spending all of our time together, I didn't even know they did it. To have that solid memory, like a shared memory that doesn't actually overlap with people's personal memories. A cool tool.
I've only had that done on one trip. And then, of course, we're halfway through the second section and we're like 4 days behind. And I'm like, come on, guys, people. Anyway, how long have you been in the outdoor industry?
The first time I was a participant was when I was 18. Pretty soon, I think then I was 19 when I started leading trips. 23 now. Just a couple months ago was the last time I was working a program. I don't know when the next program I'll lead will be, but it'll be happening at some point. Whenever it needs to happen.
What's your take on the industry at this point?
It's like with a lot of aspects of many outdoor industries in the last 20 years, like I think in this century, I think of as having had a lot of shifts in the way that people choose to go outside and the way that society in general is using the outdoors and the way that boils down into the outdoor industry specifically. I know there's a lot more struggle. We get students who are eager to be out there, but then there's also a lot of students who are eager to be out there, but for some reason or another, like don't have the access to it. There's the shifting landscape, in one sense financial, but also physically, where do the organizations that make these programs exist, and being able to make those programs that you and I know to be incredibly impactful in our own lives and also in lives of people we've worked with. But it's the, how do we bring back together the people who are seeking out those experiences and the people who have the experience facilitating that, bring those two groups together. Whether there's like the things getting more expensive and the financial risk with it, or the hyper focus on the academic side of education versus the intercultural and interpersonal side of development, like how finding a new balance in the 21st century of still having experiences in the outdoors being valuable, personal and group experiences.
Yeah, you're talking about the disconnect between what is being offered and who wants to do it and how they get there.
I think that's where I'm feeling the disconnect, definitely.
Have you put any thought into how, if you were to wave the magic wand or whatnot, how would you fix it? Or strive to improve it, maybe is a better way to think about it.
I think it can be as simple as programs with younger kids, just getting them spending more time outside, because we're in many ways animals who evolved to be outside. In that, there's a lot of ways we can grow as people, just interacting with different environments, because we've gotten really good at interacting with our city environments or local town environments and how we interact with technology and everything. But there's still whole other, not just one other side to the world, but many other sides to the world that I think is really valuable for people to learn how to interact with, both personally and within a group of people. Bringing accessible programs to younger kids, or not necessarily, like I've seen there's been a lot of shifts from, there used to be a lot of programs that had the month-long or semester-long expedition style programs, and I see a lot of those programs as feeling less in a growing world of like, we need to be doing so many things. I think it can be hard to step away from that and say, I'm going to take 3 months and I'm going to do this one thing for 3 months. And sort of pivoting with that change, that cultural change, to create those environments in a shorter form that then might inspire people to go from the weekend long or 1 week long outdoor education experience to, oh, I want to pursue this further. Maybe I'll go into doing a month long or 3 month long sort of experience.
So you want to like be more intentional about a progression?
Yeah,
like
I think be more
really
intentional about shortening the leap of where people go from being very removed from outdoor experiences. A lot of people, it's become in many ways inaccessible, both physically in terms of getting to the places where there's wilderness, and also financially in the cost of getting out into the wilderness and affording that gear. Making those first steps of like, oh, here's how you can do it for a day or for a weekend, and still get some of those small group and individual experiences of removal from what you're used to then experiencing a new thing and getting a little bit more used to that new thing. Creating the stepping stone from a shorter experience to then in a month, you don't, having done week-long programs or 3 month long program, it doesn't really break down into like, oh, here's what I grew from that program. It has many of its individual steps in itself, but taking that first step of getting there is a big leap. And if you can make that first step more achievable, then after you've had that first step, it's like, oh, I can go do this for 3 months. And that's fully taking a walk down a path and getting to see many new different things, appreciating them, and still having at the end of that longer program something that you still understand that you can go back to. I experienced a big culture shock after moving back from Nepal for 3 months. You get used to your new routine and then you come back. I think there's as much value from going and experiencing the new thing as there is coming back from experiencing the new thing, and the ways in which you process how you may have changed in that time with the new experience.
what was the hardest part about coming back?
Personally, it was just an abundance of items. It seems really simple. I had a family member who had recently passed. In my parents' house that I was moving back into, we'd had a lot of my grandmother's belongings. She had been collecting things from extended family that had a lot of family value. So everything, I was surrounded by so many things that were important, but also it was just so many things where I had been used to, for 3 months, all of my belongings fit into a single duffel bag. It was a huge shock to go from everything I can pick myself up and everything that belongs to me and go somewhere new and feel comfortable with the things I have, to then coming back and it's like, this is so much stuff. It would take me days, weeks to move all of these things. In hindsight, it's sort of a monotonous thing, but it's one of those things that you get used to time away from it for a really long time. And when you eventually do come back to it, it's a huge shift. That's like as much of a shift to, it was almost harder than shifting to having few things than the shift from having few things back to having many.
Did you have a moment where you opened up your closet and were like, how am I ever going to pick clothes for the day when you
A
got
little
back?
bit, yeah. Or like, why am I not just wearing the same thing I wore yesterday? It's not that dirty. I don't smell that bad. I've smelled a lot worse before. And that was sort of, I had the moment walking back into my house for the first time. I'm comfortable, I'm home, I'm safe, and just talking to family members for hours. But then there was the moment where I opened my bedroom door to where I had spent a significant amount of 18 years of my life. And that was the moment where I was like, I own all this. Until that moment, everything I had, I'd been carrying with me. And then it's the reminder of, oh no, there's a lot more to me that, like, for a while wasn't important to me, but for 18 years before that, it was important to me. And it's that shift of, it wasn't a, what do I wear? It's the coming into the room and like, oh, I am now wearing the belongings of this room simply by stepping into it. I hadn't been in that space for 3 months. Shifting back to that was my moment.
I never had that moment, but I do have that moment of feeling like I have way too much stuff every time that I've moved. Being like, I used to fit everything into a little tiny Civic, and now I have like 3 trips of a CRV. I'm like, what? And of course,
Yeah.
part of that was going from living in an apartment to now not.
Yeah. Something I recently had was, I own a mattress now. That doesn't fit in my car.
Oh my
And
gosh.
that's a whole new thing. I can always just load stuff into my car. And now it's like, I have something that I can't even carry on my own. I need another person to carry it with me. You're used to, in outdoor ed, carrying all of your own weight. And as an instructor, you're used to carrying other people's weight for them. But the thing that's really hard is asking someone to help carry something that's yours. That you learn how to do that. Like, you can learn how to do that in an emotional space. In the company we worked at together does Circle, where you take some emotional weight off of others. In the orientation program I worked in, we do a thing called story share, where you share your story with another individual, and then you come back to the group and you share your partner's story as though it's your own, and you fully take the weight of that story. That program I was in Nepal, we did daily gratitudes, where if you were grateful for something someone in the group or outside of the group did that day or recently, you shared that. And that's sort of like the emotional sharing that I learned through outdoor education recently, with having a physical mattress that I can't carry on my own, shifting to, oh, how do I move this physical object? Not on my own. But in many ways, there's a lot of similarities between moving an object and sharing and moving a thought or an emotion. I forgot how I even got there.
Well, and that's so wild when you to make that connection where it's like there like emotional labor is real. Like that's a
Mhm.
real thing. And like being able for somebody to express something and then you being able to like take that on is like there is like real feelings as like if somebody like takes your backpack off or when you're like, oh, I don't have to carry this. I think that's one of the craziest things of how real that is in life. Are you ready? Let's go into the rapid fire.
Okay.
To kind of close it out, what is your favorite meal to have on trail?
I already know instantly. It's Annie's mac and cheese, the classic cheddar Annie's mac and cheese with caramelized onions. Hands down, my absolute favorite wilderness.
Did you bring fresh fruit on your Where There Be Dragons trips?
Fresh fruit?
Or like veggies? Like you brought onions?
On that trip in Nepal, I think it is officially the national dish of Nepal. It's called dal bhat. It's a base of rice and lentils. With that, you will have a thing called tal curry, which is a vegetable curry dish. Sometimes it's meat, usually only on special occasions. And achar, which is a pickled vegetable dish, but the base of it is dal and bhat, which is dal, we use lentils, but we often use the same word in English, and bhat is steamed rice. And we ate that essentially every single day, even both in homestays and in the Kathmandu Valley, and also on program. Like we had a pressure cooker to cook rice, lentils, and whatever vegetables or other components went with that. But that was a cultural thing where a meal, it's not considered a meal unless it includes rice. So pretty much everything, like the main two meals of the day are lunch and dinner. Breakfast was often just tea and biscuits or maybe a little bit of yogurt. Pretty much every meal was always dal bhat. And a bunch of people came back from the program with the tourist shops in Nepal have shirts that say dal bhat power 24 hour. And a bunch of people got those. Yeah.
Okay, what then is your favorite thing to cook? Is it also the mac and cheese?
Favorite thing to cook
Or
on
no, it's
you cook on trail?
yeah, it's a favorite thing to help somebody else cook on trail.
I love fajita bowls on trail too. The mac and cheese is just a comfort meal, but in a group, love cooking like a fajita bowl or a walking taco, as some places do it, or just like that mishmash of your rice and beans, whatever vegetables either you have left at the end of a trip or what you planned for that meal. Because it's often you're struggling with how do I get all of the utensils and bowls to put all my ingredients in. If you're only carrying on a backpacking trip, you might only have a mug and a bowl, and it's like, okay, my bowl got used for serving everyone, so I guess I'm just eating out of my mug for dinner tonight.
What
Yeah.
was your favorite trip that you've been on?
So many. I think in recent years, there was a program that I was leading with my co-leader. It was her first trip leading, and we were in the Dix Range in the Adirondacks in upstate New York. Our route was a pretty untraveled route up there. There's most of the trails up there, they're not like the trails out west that have maintenance crews routinely make sure that erosion is taken care of and stuff like that. They're 100-year-old herd paths that are on a map. Sometimes they're on some maps and not on other maps, or they might be on an unofficial map. They might be on a map, but no one's hiked them or only a couple people a year hike them, so they've gotten so overgrown they functionally don't exist anymore. This was another spicy program where we were going up the backside of the range that's much less traveled than the front side, and switching off the responsibilities between both leaders and participants in the group of backcountry navigation, where you're like, I know we need to go up, and you're going to get to the top. Once you get to the top, it's usually easier to follow a trail on the way down than the way up, because on the way up you're just looking at your feet. I'm not worried at all, because I know as long as we go up, we're good. But other people in the group is like, is it that way or is it that way? Being able to step back, it's like, we're going to get to where we need. It's the technical skill learning environment of backcountry navigation, but in a much more real sense. It's just like, oh, I need to not just look at my feet. I need to look up. I need to look around. Am I walking in the direction I think I'm walking in? And that was cool. We came across that multiple times throughout that trip, both walking on our trip up the mountain, but also on the hike in, following the riverbed. That this trail, this hard to follow trail, paralleled the riverbed. At one point, it was like, well, I know the trail's over there. There's no easy way for us to get to the trail, but the trail crosses the riverbed up here, so we may as well just get our feet wet for a bit. That was one of the most fun, like the way you're interacting with navigation, but like as a group interacting with navigation. We're going to get to where we need to go, and we're not going to get there the straightforward way. As another coworker you and I have had would say, there's the right way and there's the left way. We took a lot of the left ways, but we still got to where we needed to go.
Where's your favorite place that you've visited?
I love working with groups in the mountains and on the water, but it's also important for me to get my own personal space alone in the wilderness. It helps me center myself. And I think in one of those moments, it was a solo hiking trip that I was on up in the Adirondacks. It was around sunrise on the first mountain I was hiking that day. I had only come across a couple other people on the trail, and just sort of like sitting there on my own, a little cloudy, a little cold because it's the Northeast in the morning up on a mountain and it's going to be cold. And I don't even remember what the name of the mountain was at this point, but it was one of the peaks in the Adirondacks, and just sort of like getting to sit up on a rock just at the edge of the woods at the tops of the mountains. Only a couple of them actually go above tree line. Just getting to sit there in that moment.
Do you have any other trips planned at the moment?
I love bike packing as one of the personal trips I like to do. I'm planning some bike packing trips up in the Washington and Oregon area because I haven't got the chance to explore it too much when it's not cold and rainy all winter. I love the desert down in the Southwest, but I haven't experienced the northern high desert that we have out in Eastern Washington, Eastern Oregon. So I'm really excited to get out and explore some of those areas on a bike, on foot, maybe end up on a river trip out there. But the first one I'm planning is a bike packing trip. I don't have the exact route planned out yet, though.
Oh, okay. You've experienced the hot desert. Now you're going to see what the cold desert is like. Joshua Tree is really cold at this time of year. Not that I have any idea what Eastern Washington or Eastern Oregon are like at all. Never really made it out there.
I was in the high desert of Nevada in November. Even in November, it was getting really cold. And right now, it's probably even colder.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, whenever the winter blasts come through.
Oh my gosh, winter. It is everywhere. Can't even escape it in the desert. You just still cold.
Yeah.
Well, Asa, thanks for being on.
Thanks.
And until next time, get out there and do the thing.
Let's keep doing the thing.
Do the thing.
Oh, yeah.